So the next guest on my podcast is Nick Dean from HeyFlow and Motherboard. He's on a mission to improve women's reproductive health in the workplace, which is a topic which is really important to me because I think there's so much room for improvement here and gains to be made. It might seem a little bit odd for two middle-aged men to be talking about women's reproductive health, but I encourage you to actually please listen, because the point here is that there's so much more that men in particular can do as leaders to understand and develop more effective policies and attitudes towards women's reproductive health. So please tune in and listen through. But I would say just a little warning here up front. Some of the content in here might be a little bit upsetting to some people, particularly around the topic of child loss, which comes up later. So if you're sensitive to that, just please do bear it in mind. But otherwise, please do tune in, listen in, and make some changes as a result. Thanks. So Nick, welcome, and thanks very much for coming on. Do you want to start off by just telling me a bit about HeyFlow? And I'm particularly interested in kind of why you've joined this mission, because it's not your history and your necessary background. It's not the obvious place you might have come from on to. Mm-hmm. So yeah, do you want to tell us a little bit about that journey and the mission that HeyFlow's on?
Yeah. So effectively, HeyFlow, what we really do is look at reproductive health inclusion in the workplace. And what that means is, if we take the concept of the fact of reproductive health from periods through to menopause and a huge wavy line in between it, there's a huge gap that sits between what employers believe is happening and all of the scenarios, the emotions, the feelings, the realities, the penalties that happen within that cycle to what actually people feel. It was born out of a project that we do called Motherboard, which is a not-for-profit organisation. And we started that specifically looking at the tech industry on the basis that there's a glaring statistic, which is 50% of women will leave the tech industry by the age of 35.
It's terrible, isn't it?
It is. And then when you look at that, it's the closer that we got to that reality and looked at the lived experience of what happened, is that gap between what employers think and for people that don't know my background, it is recruitment. The reality then of sitting on the recruiting side and having employees come to you all the time and tell you the truth as to why they've left their business. That gap is huge, and effectively HeyFlow is closing that gap.
Great. So you really sort of saw the problem close up of trying to close that gap as a recruiter, and that kind of just moved you into the space essentially.
Yeah, and absolutely. And if you look at it very logically, what you would do is, and these are the truth or realities, is that you would have a constant stream of clients coming to you saying, can you get us a more gender diverse shortlist? We need more women, we need this. And you start to see that the people are trying to build pools at what we would call the lower quartile of kind of salary and kind of experience. But actually, when so many women drop off, come that kind of mid quartile, upper quartile, it's an endless cycle. And there isn't enough emphasis on how you actually look at changing the systems that exist, that sit in the middle as to why people are leaving.
Yeah, I think I can sort of speak to that from personal experience. There's a lot of good intention out there in the industry. There's a lot of people who want to do the right thing, but they don't really know what the right thing is or how to do it. So I guess that's kind of part of HeyFlow's mission, is to help sort of bridge that gap.
Yeah, and if you take it into a personal reason why then I've taken that upon myself to do something about it. The first thing I would say is that there is a book called Invisible Women, and if every man reads that book, they will suddenly realise that there is a huge challenge, and that actually men play quite a large role, if not a significant role, as to why systems are as they are, and actually why so many of the penalties are. I'm a believer that if you don't know, once you know, and then you can do something about it. But if you know and you choose to do nothing about it, then that just moves into ignorance then. But without men being involved in conversations and actually where potentially power or influence within organisations or government or wherever that might sit, then it is just a one-way battle.
I think it's a really good book to recommend to our audience here, particularly because It's quite data-driven. A lot of people in our industry are quite data-driven. It's quite factual and objective, as well as sort of having a really good point to it. So yeah, good recommendation, good shout out.
Yeah.
So let's start off then at the sort of beginning of a woman's career, and where someone like me as an employer might be starting to engage with women and sort of trying to encourage them into the workplace. What sort of things do I need to be thinking about, or someone like me needs to be thinking about, in terms of accommodating women and their needs, and things that I, as a male employer, haven't experienced myself but need to sort of learn to understand?
I think it depends on your. It sounds simple, but it depends on the starting objective. For example, if we look at the gender pay gap, gender pay reporting is mandatory for businesses over 250 people in the UK. If you are specifically looking at solutions where a gender pay gap exists, you have a very clear reason to why you need to tackle this situation and actually focus on the area that we've said, which is the whole career of a woman, which moves through the reproductive cycle, which we'll obviously get into. It's actually no different for an SME. It's just at the moment they don't need to report on it, but the same objective matters. And that's where a lot of, I guess, within the corporate world, that focus sits in within, and also ESG reporting. So we're kind of looking at an area where people are being forced into actually taking action, and it has to be more than performative, rather than let's say the right things, let's do the right things, let's pretend that all these things matter, until actually come the day, do I care more about profit, or do I care more about actually how do I help people through life moments? And those moments may take years, but they are moments which lead to somebody dropping out of their career at the end of the day. So from a starting point, and this would sound very, very obvious for me to say, is that the best thing to consider is, and I think that this goes for all inclusion, it's only easy, or it's easier to understand something if we've got lived experience. And if we don't have lived experience, it's very hard to put yourself in the shoes of somebody and actually want to. And actually a lot of the time it's like, that's your problem, which we can touch on lots of times within reproductive health. So take, periods, for example. So if you'd asked me 3 years ago, I'd just go periods and talk about periods. I'd go, no, that's really weird. Why would I be doing that in 3 years and having a conversation? Take that topic individually. Once you understand how deep of a problem it is from a health perspective, it's absolutely huge. Until you understand and can ask the questions as to what the impact of those are, you can't then start to create a change, which is fundamentally in that instance a taboo subject. And it is simply taboo. I can say period, it's not a problem. Anybody can say it. I mean, some people are going to have, and don't get me wrong, some people are going to have reasons why they may have particular challenges, or that's difficult for them to do it, but it is fundamentally a societal conditioning. Much as mental health was several years ago in the workplace, mental health is a much more accepted conversation now, because it's become a conversation. There's mental health officers. Well-being shouldn't be classed as a benefit, it should be a given, but it's actually promoted as a reason why somebody would.
But I guess mental health's a little bit more accessible because we all have mental health, be it good or bad, or better or worse at different times, but we don't all have periods. So that does make it harder. Yeah,
which is the lived experience. But what you can do is, so if we take the stats on on periods, the average, so one of the pieces of work that we do is we'll go into an entire workforce, and if we take periods, we will ask everybody who menstruates in that business, how comfortable have you been speaking to a manager? How often does it impact your work? How does this affect, your career? The average stat is that 4% of women in a workplace have the confidence to speak to their manager and say, I'm struggling. 48% of women that menstruate have that on a monthly basis. So if a business has got mandated days, for example, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, what you're doing is saying you need to show up and be present and hide that and not speak to your manager at all, no matter what you're experiencing, because we can't talk about it.
Yeah. And is that 4% the same whether you've got a female manager or a male manager?
It will increase if you have a female manager. There is still a taboo and there is still a conditioning. But in reality, if we go back to where the gender pay gap exists, which is middle and upper quartile, the majority of managers are male.
Yeah, especially in our sector.
Yeah. Especially in tech,
Yeah.
So unless you start to change that, now if you go to the manager side and go back to what I said earlier about what you don't know, it is also ingrained that it's culturally not right to talk about that. And so that there isn't a two-way process on that. So if we then go to a leadership point of view, leaders are expecting managers to increasingly consider employee health and to support employee health, because if you think about a team these days, if we give a team of 5, one person maybe is likely to be neurodivergent, one person will have reproductive health challenges, one person might be going through fertility, one person might have a disability that's hidden, one person might have severe mental health problems, and we're saying to that manager, can you look after these people? But at the moment, people are going, can you just go and look after those people? But that's how you need to get into the psyche of how does it feel? How do you show up? How do we build inclusive policies that support everybody, that support individuality and accommodate? Because going back to the situation or the challenge with periods, and it's, if Sophie was here, who's my co-founder, Sophie would say that when she has her period, she will often just need to be at home because she could get a migraine. And if she's at home, she feels comfortable. She knows when to step away from a screen, when to leave a meeting, when to have that accommodation. It's as simple as that. If she was mandated to come in on that day, she feels uncomfortable. She's not at her best and then you lose the day's productivity because the migraine can come in. So it is actually within everybody's interest to create the most productive environment.
Yeah, and so something that I only sort of came to realise relatively recently was how different periods affect different women. All my partners in the past have actually not suffered particularly bad menstruation across their lives, and then it's only very recently that I've sort of learned that some people in the workplace can suffer really hugely every month. With conditions like endometriosis, it's like it can be really debilitating. So how can we help make that a little bit more kind of known and visible to managers so that we can accommodate it?
Yeah. The greatest thing is getting rid of the taboo and opening up the conversation and considering that and what you've got to be careful as well is though that if we focus into very specific conditions, we've got to be careful that you don't flip into a negative reaction of what about me, which will happen and can happen with men. Because if you say, right, everybody who may really struggle on a monthly basis, we're going to allow you a 2-day period that gives you that time and that space to do it. And you go, that's brilliant. And that might be the accommodation that's needed. But if everybody who else we're trying to pull into the conversation to break a taboo or whatever it might be goes, well, what about me? I'm neurodivergent, or I am this, or I am that, then actually you can create the divide even further. So it really is, for me, it's about looking at the human connection of health, as I would call it, health equity, and looking at the individual parts within a business. So actually somebody over here who won't experience periods or won't experience something deliberating doesn't need to think, what about me? Because they think, no, my health thing is this, and you respect that, and I respect you, and actually this is health. And our health is accommodated for us to perform. And if we've got equal playing field, then I'm going to come my way to meet you, and you're going to come your way to meet me. Yeah.
So it's just part of bringing any health condition, to be it mental, physical, female, any health condition, just being able to feel like you can talk about it, and it's something that people will listen to and care about.
You should do. Yeah. That's the difference. It's really not easy to create those policies though. Because of the accommodations that are needed. But I think if you take it in its most simplest form, it is looking at understanding if the individual can go to a manager, the same as an individual will experience different autism or ADHD or whatever it might be, and this is me, this is how it might affect me, this is how it might show up. If you're aware of that and I need to step in and say, this is what I need to do, I can just leave that with you and you go, no problem at all. Yeah. Take the 2 hours, work from home. Yeah. Because sometimes they're quite gentle things. They're very, I just need to be in a comfortable space. We met with, really, really interesting, we met with a CEO of a very large agency who we're just doing some work with at the moment. And her experience was, it was brilliant, because she said this is the first time I've sat in a room with people and spoke about kind of periods. And she said, and I'm going to be very transparent now, I've been in boardrooms where, you know, you've got to say it as she said it, where I've been leaking and thinking, shit, what do I do? I am not comfortable to say to my board now, I'm experiencing this. And she has to sit through the whole rest of the meeting in that experience as the CEO. And then interestingly though, when she had kind of understood about her cycle and how it shows up and so forth, she does two things now, which is one, creates her board meetings around her cycle when she's thriving. And secondly, she will pitch when she's thriving. So she now uses it to her advantage. So again, you either live in the, no, let's not talk about this, or you go, actually, how do we use this to understand ourselves and be a better business?
Yeah.
Have a better culture, have better relationships, and understand each other. And that's how she uses it.
Yeah, which is, I guess, great when your periods are really regular and you can plan around it. But let's skip ahead, actually. I wasn't going to talk about this just yet, but perimenopause, you know, it's irregular. You can't really plan around those sort of things so much. How can that sort of affect the workplace, and what can we do about it?
And again, this is one of those with lived experience. I'll never have the menopause, so I'm speaking from what I hear. And people will experience everything differently and have different scenarios. The way that I see it is, if we look at the gender pay gap, which is one of the biggest issues that we have within business, there's three what we call cliff drop moments, which is where women literally drop out of the workforce. And the first one, unsurprisingly, is first child. The second one is perimenopause, and the third one is menopause. I have a diagram that describes it beautifully, and you can see the drop. The most interesting feedback that we get around menopause is actually people are more comfortable talking about it until they experience it. And when they experience it, actually there seems to be actually now I don't want to talk about this.
Really?
Yeah, and it can be a real challenge. I think now, if I have this right, I think there is 52, I checked this up yesterday, 52 symptoms. And if you read those 52 symptoms, you kind of live in an everyday life. Like it's like, oh my God, I could do that, I could do that. The two which I hear the most common are brain fog and confusion. And with that comes a severe lack of confidence of, I don't know what's happening. And then again, I'm generalizing, there's a moment of, okay, I've got some support, I've got some help. It changes like that. And actually the amount of times I have heard, I was about to leave my job until this eureka moment, and I was so close, but I stayed.
Oh, right.
Because I got support, I got help, whatever that might be. And literally, I'm never going to experience it. This is... Yeah.
So what are those eureka moments? How can we foster them and make them happen?
I think it's different. I saw yesterday somebody had said that they were embracing menopause training into the organisation, and I've heard three approaches to this. I heard women say, my starting point needs to be solely with women because I need to be comfortable, I need to have shared experience. This is where I feel my starting, I'm going to start to understand what's happening on and talking to people who are kind of with me. There is a middle group, which is actually, I am the person experiencing this and I'm comfortable coming out and talking about this in a mixed gender group because I want people to understand what's happening and how we can recognise and support. And it's when we share lived experience, it's far better than a policy or whatever it might be, because you're in the psyche of what happens and how people feel and how they respond to it. And then there's actually a reality of actually, if we come into allyship, men are terrified of asking questions, terrified of saying the wrong thing. Their partners may be going through menopause, could be going through menopause. They want to support, they want to care, they want to support colleagues, they want to support friends, they want to be whatever it is they're doing. But actually they're terrified and they just sit at the back and don't say anything. So you've almost got to be very careful how you approach three groups. Where it gets tricky is that you can have the majority of the business going, oh, I'd really embrace this understanding and learning. And you can have somebody who's like, I feel so uncomfortable about this. That you're treading a very careful line. And it's about having the conversations, I think, which consider all angles and find the right approaches, which meet the best approach for everybody, really.
Yeah, I guess it's sort of handling that latter group is kind of saying it's okay that you feel really uncomfortable, but we're having this conversation anyway. It's kind of, I guess, as leaders, we have to kind of have the will and force to actually, you know, make that step forward despite the discomfort.
Yeah, absolutely. I think as well, though, there's more supported people feel, no matter how comfortable it is, the more they will start to edge out. And that goes with men as well. You know, allyship is a huge topic, and one that's, I think, really relevant to kind of raise now in this instance, because allyship fits within everything that we're talking about. And there is right back to where we started, there is a huge challenge with men, and actually building men's confidence to come out and talk about things. I did a study recently, there was a big report out last year, and it said, I don't remember the exact stat now, I think it was 47% of people feel that gender equality's gone too far. And you're a bit like, wow, okay. Now, I'm not really a half glass kind of person, but actually I look at that and go, that is terrible. But if there's 53% of people that feel that it's still got a way to go, there is still a massive amount of people that still aren't saying anything, that do believe, and that's the best place to start, because we need to bring those people into conversations. Getting men confident and comfortable is the biggest challenge, and that was what the report said. The study said. The study said the biggest thing that holds people back from coming out and saying anything, even liking a post on LinkedIn, whatever it might be, is the fear of repercussion, the fear of saying the wrong thing, and a lack of education. And so it's easier, like we said earlier, just to sit in the shadows and go, I kind of believe, but it's not my problem. And that is a real issue.
Yeah, it is when there's such a big proportion of the workforce affected, and it's there are some much more sideline topics that are also very fragile that we have to occasionally deal with as leaders, and that sort of, I guess I have a bit more sympathy for people who tiptoe around that a bit. But when you're talking about half your workforce and things that are going to affect huge numbers of people, it seems odd that that should still be an option to stay quiet when it's so important.
Yeah, there's a real fear. There's an absolute real fear of stepping out and being comfortable, and so it's easier not to do it. I don't care. I literally don't care, because why don't I care? Because I believe it is the right thing to do. I got the stats that I looked at yesterday. It says that, and this is McKinsey reports, that if we tackle gender equality properly, we would get 840,000 women in the UK back into work, which gives an increased GDP of £150 million. Why don't we want that?
Yeah.
Like, why?
Yeah, but I guess part of your incentive must come from the fact that you see so many of the great effects that happen, like people actually having those eureka moments, coming out and seeing it, and when you're fed with a lot of positive feedback like that, it's much more easy to kind of to get over any awkwardness or negative moments. But the difficulty, I guess, is for people who haven't received that positive feedback yet to make that first step to open up the conversation, which I can appreciate is hard for a lot of people.
And a lot of men say, but all I do is get berated, and that it's feminism and so forth. But it's not. And actually, there are a huge amount of women that want men to come into the conversation and support. And a lot of these people are either married, everyone has a mum, they have sisters, they have daughters, they have people that have been affected, and that is the route to many people's heart. We did a session 22 senior leaders from digital agencies off the back of a big report that we did around male allyship with Beamer. It was absolutely fascinating. The starting point was brilliant because we took the questions that we effectively were looking at the confidence to manage reproductive health in the workplace, bearing in mind that they're senior leaders. So we started with the question, it was like, do you have a problem losing women within the workplace? And it started by saying 94%, and this was out of 114 people, the report, said, no, we don't have a problem. And we're like, you don't need it. It's great, you've got it all sorted. And then as we kind of led them through a path, it was, so how do you feel equipped to manage somebody through a return to work experience? And 24% said, yes, I feel equipped to do that. Do you feel equipped to deal with the basics of somebody telling you that they're pregnant? I can't remember exactly, it was like 52%. And then you're like, so you've said this, but in reality, when you're actually faced with what that means, because these are all the drop-off points and these are all the experiences that younger women in the workforce are looking at those role models dropping out of the workforce going, shit, if that happens, is that going to happen to me? Because that board is predominantly male. And so what happens to me when I hit that age? What's the role modeling? And therefore I'm going to start making decisions on my career now. So it's really interesting. So from that point of view, the gap. So when we did the session, and actually, again, we go into it and it's not, this is all your fault, this is a problem. You're like, we go in with like, until you know, you don't know, should say all the time. They didn't know how the gender pay gap works, that it's linked directly to reproductive health, which is proven within a Nobel Scientific Prize in 2023. They didn't understand the pension gap and actually how the gender pay gap then influences a lack of pension at later life. They hadn't thought about if somebody comes back into the work, or if somebody that's had a baby comes back into the workplace, how actually them not being invited to networking events or social events, or that they're put on less interesting projects, or that they're deemed not to want a career anymore, all impact why people leave. And again, if you go into the common statistic around return to work, which is that of everybody that comes back from a return to work after 3 years, only 24% survive. Gender pay gap. It's literally the same all the way through. And the reason that exists is because managers don't understand return to work. They don't understand how, the experience of coming back to work is not, there's your seat back, can you crack on now? Oh, I'm locked out by IT. How does that feel? Dreadful. Have I been forgotten? Has it been assumed I no longer want a career? And multiple experiences. Why are people saying I'm part-time? Because I've done 4 days work in 5, because I just got my head down and did it. There's many, many little things which are just pushing away all the time, which get women to the point where they just go, I'll just go on my own.
So let's rewind back to the point where a woman might want to start a family. So they would like to get pregnant. That's a lot easier for some people than others, as as I've learned, not through personal direct experience. Being fortunate enough to be able to have children, as and when we wanted. But I know a lot of people don't, and whether it is easy or not, there's challenges for everyone at that stage, right?
Yeah, and this the unfortunate nice part about this bit of the conversation is that I do have lots of lived experience, so it's easy from a partner perspective to be supporting somebody that goes through that. Start with fertility. It's a real challenge because there's so many components to it. If somebody is going to go, so if we start right back, start at the very bleak side of things, and I have a really good friend who's terrified in this space, which is from a societal point of view, and I'm always conscious when I say this, it sounds like propaganda, but it's not intended. From a societal point of view, women are generally leaving it later to have children, and we see that through freezing egg collection and so forth.
Yeah, there's a terrible stat that I was open to So Emily's sister is a doctor. She works at Chelsea Hospital in London, and the stat there. Do you know the average age of a first-time mother?
Tell me.
It's 40.
Okay, yeah. And the context of that is that it's harder and harder and harder to get pregnant biologically the older that you get. So if women are leaving it later to have children, the chance of getting pregnant in the first place then naturally is harder. The child rate is reducing. People are living longer, and if you look at the very long-term problem of that is the care system's absolutely screwed. And that sounds like propaganda, but it is a very real situation. The reason that women generally are leaving it longer is cost of living, can't afford to, want more emphasis on their career, and actually can see the barriers ahead as to what's going to happen. So how do I stay in the game? So everything that we're talking about, if there aren't societal shifts and company shifts and cultural shifts, that problem is always going to exist. So bring it to fertility. If people are leaving it later to discover whether they have got a fertility issue or not, the fertility journey can take several years. So you can be ruling out the situation. The majority of men and people will look at somebody's life and go, you got married. I'm going to second guess what's happening now. Who's the easy bet here? What about that person's career? What about this? What about that? And I'm generalizing, but there will be lots of people that will go, that is very, very true. And there's no guarantee that that person's going to get pregnant. So the discrimination starts even from the start of a fertility journey. Fertility itself is really difficult because you're sat with that, the difficulty of that. What's positive is that businesses are increasingly creating fertility policies. The flip side is that the minute that you come forward and say, I need to use that policy, is the minute that you're going, I'm putting myself here at risk. So it's very difficult. And it can take several years. It's a very emotional situation. It's a very physical situation. It is injections day after day after day. It is medication. Without going into all the nuance of it, it's the chances of success are minimal. You're kind of at late 30s. I think it's 25% chance of success. Financially, you get one chance from the government. After that, it's $5-6 grand a pop. If you can't afford to do it after that, but from a workplace perspective, that person has to show up, and they're the horror stories that people are going through hormonal change, injection, everything that I've just said, and still showing up at work and being expected to show up at work, and not worrying about that discrimination of exposing it is a real problem.
Yeah, and from a sort of employer perspective, it's very easy just to see that person as a key person risk. It's like a flight risk, like a hole waiting to appear in the business. But I think we need to just kind of treat every day as it comes, don't we? It's, there's something about the psychology of living for the moment is kind of where you have your best life. I think if your business is running for today, then it's running its best as it can be, and if you're always doing that, then we'll always be good. So I think there's I think there's a fundamental flaw in that thinking of kind of always planning for tomorrow, but it will always be in people's minds, won't it?
Yeah, because of the discrimination. I mean, I've had 3 instances where in my own business where 3 people were pregnant, and all 3 told me in advance. I had one that said, I'm going to get pregnant in the next 5 years. And I was like, it's amazing. Keep me posted, because we can work together. Like literally we can work together to make this work. Someone else, fertility challenges, they never got pregnant. It was a great shame for them, but it meant that it was like, keep talking to me, keep telling me how you're feeling, keep telling me about your career, keep telling me what you want. And it was great because we were like, you just work through the solution. But people, the general vibe is that doesn't happen. That is not the norm.
Yeah, and we've had people here sort of give us good notice of the fact that they're trying, the fact their intentions, all that sort of thing, and it really does make it so much easier as an employer to engage and actually give the best to that person. But I can completely understand the fear that some people have and the reason why others don't.
Yeah.
And one thing that always sort of saddens me as a sort of co-worker is it's the things you don't know and that you can't support. And I guess one of the biggest of those is child loss.
Absolutely, and I think again this comes down to, it's really interesting with Sophie again, co-founder, because so we have experienced, me and my partner have experienced child loss. Sophie hasn't. So Sophie's really interesting because she says, I know lots and lots of people that have, and this is one area as a woman that I can't put my mind into because I can do my best, but I can't feel it. Miscarriage is child loss. That's the bottom line. There's an organisation called Tommy's, which is a charity for child loss. The statistic which they give is that 1 in 5 people will experience it. So if you think of the size of the workforce, it is going to happen. I think the worst thing about child loss is that people can be expected to, a few days you're back in the office, it's all okay. And that's if they've disclosed it, because again, you come back into the discrimination. What do I do? You didn't know I was going to,
especially
you didn't even know.
Early pregnancy child loss, I think happens a lot without being disclosed.
Under 12 weeks, yeah, absolutely. But if somebody's gone, it doesn't take away from anybody's situation. In a worst extreme, if someone's gone through several years of fertility, and that is emotionally absolutely broken them, and yet they need to show up and be present, and can be hiding behind that wall of, I cannot let you know that I'm planning because I am worried about what the repercussion of that might be. Or they're in a very accommodating environment where actually no matter what the age is it is bereavement. And that is going to be different for everybody, however that they treat it.
Yeah, and it's psychological, but that's obviously fed by hormonal issues as well, and changes that are going on in the body. But I have absolutely no lived experience of this, so I find it particularly difficult to empathise. But that doesn't sort of restrict the desire to support and to be there and give people what they need. Yeah,
and then it goes right down to the small things. I mean, like when we experienced it, just to summarise it very quickly, it was an IVF. We had twins. One of the twins miscarriage. The other twin is 14 now. So we had to go to the hospital every Friday for about 6 weeks because there was a complication that the miscarriage could impact the other baby that was growing. And we had to sit in a room of people specifically sat thinking that they were going through a miscarriage.
Wow.
And the room is packed, like literally packed. It's one moment on a Friday morning every week, and it is horrific. And you'd go in and you would do the scan, and due to, clearly we've got one that's 14 now, so every week we got the good news that it's okay, the risk is reducing, and they used to say to us every week, they give you the photograph, put the photograph in your pocket and don't smile. When you leave, do not smile and don't say a word, because 90% of that room is in trauma. But 90% of that room is going back to work. And they have to strap on the face. And that's one moment in time. It's horrific,
Yeah, that's incredible that people are sort of dealing so silently with that much of an issue. And so what can we do as employers to help? I mean, I guess it just comes back to being able to have the conversation.
Empathy is huge. I genuinely think it's about asking how people feel culturally within the environment. And the biggest thing is giving managers the tools to support people in these moments so they're approachable, and that a manager can just do the most basic thing, of being comfortable so someone can come to them and say, this is what I'm experiencing. And for that manager just to say, it's going to be all right, just tell me how you feel. And we will work out a plan between us, rather than having a face that says, shit, what does that mean to me? I don't know how to deal with this. How quick can I palm you off to HR? I'll get a policy and I'll read that at you because I'm terrified of this conversation. And if every manager can start with that, we'll get you through this, people will go, thank you. And you pave the way forward.
So we've got a lot of distance to travel, I think, from where we are, like across society at the moment, in terms of people's ability to have that conversation, and where we kind of need to be, where we should be. what are the first steps to making that transition from run away, really can't talk about this, how can I get rid of you, to tell me, I'm listening, I'm here for you?
If I go right, if we were wrapping it up, I would say it comes, if the change in the workplace is huge and it's continuing to change, go back to those things. If we take 4 areas of health: neurodiversity, reproductive health, disability, ability, mental health and well-being, that's 100% of the workplace. You don't have to be having a crisis to not have mental health. It will show up at different times. As employees are continually saying, and will increasingly say, I need to bring myself to work. I can no longer leave it at the door here and pick it up here because I'm not being productive. This isn't good for me, this isn't good for you. Until leadership accept that managers need training specifically to deal with all of that and the nuances of individuals and what they will bring on a daily basis, reproductive health is just one part of it. But the approach to every single one of those individuals is how you build a team that's effective and that is productive, and then removes the what about me as well. Because everybody's looking at each other going like, I'm supported. I understand why you do that. I understand why you've got that. I understand why I've got this accommodation, but collectively aren't we brilliant for it? And the manager feels I've been given the training to do that and the support to do that. But without that, being a manager is a horrific job.
But there's something a little bit heartwarming about that thought, though, because that manager training kind of feels like it's training people to be better humans as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Right?
We're teaching people to be better listeners, better, increase their empathy, ability to understand other people, have better human connection. And that just seems like a great gift to be able to give to anyone anyway.
Yeah. And the great, and I do feel quite strongly on this one, when I was running a much larger business, the moments that we are all humans, and I think that it's also a two-way street. It's leadership is always on show, always be the brave face, always be your health, it's always be strong and all these things. But actually the incredible moments I always found is when somebody in the business who may have only been there a few weeks or whatever would actually say to you, it's tough at the moment, how's it going? And you go, oh, that's nice. Just actually, you're not just in your own world doing your own battles. Actually, when you start communicating and going, how can you help each other? Suddenly everything starts to come together.
Yeah.
And it's just opening that forum of going, I feel heard, I feel understood, I had a voice. We can progress some of these challenges like we've done with mental health. And if we chip away at those things, then everybody's going to be in a much better world. Yeah.
And I find one little baby step towards that, which I try and practice around the office, is when people cursorily just sort of say, hey, how's it going? As people do, as a greeting without actually expecting anything back. I think it's quite powerful to sometimes actually say, well, actually it's a bit of crap because X and Y, or it's really good because this happened. Actually not give the standard answer, but actually open up a bit. And I think as leaders, if we demonstrate that on a micro basis, it's at least setting the tone a little bit to say, actually, it's okay to talk about how things really are, not just give the standard facade that we're supposed to give.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially because it's not always easy. That's the truth. And so when you're masking that, it's like the honesty and the trust is there because you can see the transparency. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Nick, thanks so much.
You're welcome.
It's been a brilliant conversation. It's been a longer one than normal, but but I think that's a testament to the richness of this scene that we're digging, and kind of how important it is, and how much there is to move and progress here. So well done for doing such great work that you're doing. Love your mission.
Thank you.
And fully support it.
Brilliant. Thank you.